Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Do you like coffee?
Coffee? I love coffee.
Oh, then you're gonna love this. Yeah, it's fresh coffee. This time we watched Season 6, Episode 9, The Skydivers.
The story of a cup of coffee that takes a half an hour to be made.
Oh man, and this is it. We're doing something intense and special. We have started the Coleman Francis trilogy, the original Lord of the Rings.
Well, before we get to that, let's do a quick follow-up from our previous episode, Phase 4, which was a Saul Bass film, in which we talked about another Saul Bass short that was well-regarded, and in fact, as I recall, won an Academy Award, called Why Man Creates, and we got a little note about that.
Yes, Tim from the hit podcast, The Fiasco Brothers Watch a Movie, a.k.a. Dial T for Fiasco, a.k.a. retooled name to be announced shortly, has written in and said, I was shown Why Man Creates at an assembly in 6th or 7th grade. I still remember the jokes about inventing the zero, and the germ panicking when he realized he was looking at Louis Pasteur. I snort laughed at that, was the only person in the auditorium who did so, and confirmed my social status as a complete dork for at least another year.
Yes, and certainly doesn't reconfirm that weekly when he plays Jackbox with us on Friday nights at youtube.com. Follow that link and you'll find him there making jokes with us and certainly not being a complete dork, as the rest of us aren't, for we are all very cool people. But we have another letter. In fact, we got a lot of notes from people who are very excited that we're about to launch into the Coleman Francis trilogy.
Oh boy.
And we got a letter from devoted listener Chad from Seattle, who we hadn't heard from in a while, and it was very nice to hear from him again, who writes in saying, greetings. I hope you're all safe and well. In addition to supporting humanitarian organizations and food banks, it's also important that we continue to support the arts that provide inspiration and a healthy mental break. So we're standing strong as Patreon supporters and encourage others to do the same. Well, now, as a side note, I can't have said that better myself. Thank you very much for your ongoing and generous contributions, Chad, and everybody else who does at patreon.com/itsjustashow or itsjustashow.com/Patreon.
Yeah, we're made possible by listeners like you.
Yeah. He goes on, I'm more excited than I should be to hear your take on Francis Coleman's contributions to cinema. Nice. Best described as a salute to nihilism. Frankly, I think Francis is a far worse director than Ed Wood, but of course, whose films have a contagious zest and wonder. Coleman's work, meanwhile, is a dark hand pushing us toward the bottom of a well, conveniently located behind a restaurant featuring frog legs. As you watch this tragic trilogy in short order, you notice the signature Francis touches. Small aircraft, desert wandering, antagonists being gunned down in a desert at the end, and coffee. So much coffee. Is that a disciplined approach to narrative storytelling, or a lack of creativity? Could be both. Is it just a cynical worldview that no institutions can be trusted? Is it a comment on Cold War paranoia, or just the ramblings of a free-range wannabe filmmaker? Have fun with it.
We will, Chad. We will.
We'll try. That is a very good letter and a very perceptive reading of the main threads that go through Coleman Francis Coleman's work.
Francis Ford Coleman.
Exactly. And we will talk about that more in a bit. But yeah, we got a few tweets and we got a few messages in our Slack that people who support us on Patreon can hang out in. And everybody has Coleman Francis fever. It's just, I don't know, there's something in the air these days. Everybody's talking about Coleman Francis and nothing else.
Yes. That's why we have to wear face masks to make sure the Coleman Francis doesn't get in.
Well, let's not let the Coleman Francis fans have to wait any longer for our deep dives into the Coleman Francis filmography. This time we watch Season 6, Episode 9, The Skydivers.
But first, a short, asking that all-important question, why study industrial arts? You see, there's a young man, and he looks kind of like Buddy Holly, and he seems awfully lonely. But we know that his heart is full, for through the magic of voiceover, he tells us why study industrial arts. You could do anything. You could make a birdhouse, you could do some other things, and he's got a pal. The pal, he's doubtful. He questions the wisdom of this Buddy Holly Christ figure. But don't you worry, because not only is he partially converted by our Buddy Holly friend, but then the gym teacher comes while they're laughing about industrial arts, and the gym teacher is in fact a scholar, a disciple of industrial arts. It helped him buy a house. Wow. I guess there's so many reasons to study industrial arts. I'm going to stop asking that question. I need to know what to do about juvenile delinquency. I hope this show tackles that sometime soon. Courtesy of Centron.
And now for our feature presentation. Look, nobody's going to tell you what the plot of the Skydivers is. The movie isn't interested in explaining itself, and Mike and the bots talk over the few scenes that offer any clues to what's going on. And that's okay. The Skydivers isn't about the plot. Oh, sure, there's a married couple, Harry and Beth, and they run a skydiving place out in the desert, and they're both having affairs, kind of. But then they both decide to stop fooling around. Now, the woman that Harry's been canoodling with, Susie, she isn't too happy to be jilted, and she wants revenge, so she does the natural thing. She gets her boyfriend to join her in pouring acid into Harry's parachute, and then Harry dies falling quickly from the sky. Well, there are some guys from the Federal Aviation Administration at the scene, because someone else died skydiving at this joint a few days earlier. Anyway, the FAA guys chase down Susie and her man and kill them without any due process or really any evidence at all. So I guess they're the bad guys? Beth, not our Beth, the Beth in the movie, Beth shuts down the deadly skydiving facility and the closing credits roll without any music. It's bleak, and that's what this movie's about. It's people living dreary, dull lives, looking for kicks, and dying in the process, unloved, undistinguished, and unmemorable. And badly edited. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, in our first segment, Tom opens with a pompous planetarium show, and it's going to be majestic and grand, but what's this? He is constantly interrupted by crows ribbing about Uranus. Mike is naturally of no help, and really, who can resist finding out more about the deep mysteries within Uranus? I'm sorry. Much like Jeff Dunham discovered on his solo career, it's usually funnier when the puppet says it. After the break, Crow won't let up, which causes Mike to totally snuff, yo. Anyway, the Mads are calling. In Deep 13, Frank teases Mike for being totally stoned, man. He wakes and bakes every day. Woo! Anyway, Dr. F quickly puts a stop to this. And then Deep 13 and the SOL do competitive swing choir. It has to be seen and heard to be believed. Why, there should be an MST3K cast recording of all these numbers. And all your favorites are there. New York, New York. Some other ones I've forgotten, but they're all there, rest assured. Anywho, Frank tallies up the score, and sure enough, the Mads have won. By segment 2, Tom crafts a wallet because, guess what? It's industrial arts time, with Mike as the shop teacher. Sadly, Crow, once again being the bully, is making fun of Tom's wallet. Crow is hoisted by his own petard when Mike tasks him to show him the napkin holder that Crow has allegedly been working on. Crow ends up sawing himself into 2 sentient halves, but is luckily glued back together by the time they get back in the theater. In segment 3, Crow's caught in a double jock lock. I'll allow Mike to explain.
Oh, double jock lock, beloved high school prank, wherein the victim, usually an unathletic nerd, well, like, say, Crow, right, has the loops of his jock strap pulled up over his legs, rendering it virtually impossible for the victim to free himself.
Crow wanted to try his Houdini act to see if he can get out of it, and declines Mike's help. By segment 4, Tom launches an airstrike on Crow's new car, and he also launches the said airstrike on Crow himself. You can feel bad for Crow, but he was originally going to do a drive-by attack on Tom. Final segment. Crow, once again, tangled up, but this time, Tom is with him. They're caught up in their parachutes, and they cannot get down. Again, Crow declines Mike's help because the bots need to learn and grow. Mike reads a letter from the colorfully named Bendy Martini, who praises the show as being as funny, if not funnier than Chips, and also hits on Nuvina, who is in an episode we have not covered yet. Mike then sings, "Would you like to fly in my beautiful balloon?" Back in Deep 13, Dr. F throws dodgeballs at Frank within a sadistically small circle. Is this more or less evil than your standard American gym class? The end.
This is a nice episode.
Now, the real question is, Chris, is this a nice episode to watch during quarantine?
I mean, it's been about 20 years since I last watched this episode because I've been saving Coleman Francis for a special day. Mm-hmm. So it didn't seem any worse or better to watch during quarantine than at other times. I don't know. Did you find it particularly challenging?
Well, here's the thing. This is a brilliant episode. This is a great baby's first MST3K, especially coming with that short. That short will win them over, but also like the host segments I think are extremely funny, especially the Planetarium one. Yes. And the swing choir. Like that whole opening is phenomenal. I love the Coleman Francis movies because I am fascinated by movies that cause what I call the boredom time warp, which is where time just seems to stop and you don't know if you've been watching the film for 3 minutes or 30 days.
Yeah, when you think back on a film and the timeline is just completely jumbled and it just, you remember it as kind of a paste.
Yeah, and watching this movie messes with your senses. By the time the credits roll, like your feeble brain can barely add fractions.
Despite not really having anything happen.
No, it's just fascinatingly bad to watch. However, it became a little bit maddening watching this because you and I, we don't have our freedom, nor do the listeners. We have to do the right thing, and we have to stay in our homes whenever possible. This is correct and good. However, seeing bad people with their freedom just waste it on skydiving and little bikini bottom dances and lust and betrayal, and they're all so terrible and oily. Oh, it was maddening. And by the end of it, I wasn't laughing at the episode so much as I was laughing like an insane person.
So one of the remarkable things, as you're saying, is that there are a bunch of people who drive out from nowhere to come to this airfield in the middle of nowhere because they vaguely heard that somebody's going to do a jump.
Yeah.
A thing that presumably happens fairly often at the skydiving facility. Otherwise, they really wouldn't be able to stay in business long, which they don't because people keep dying over the course of the 2 weeks of this film, but whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like a pretty boring area. And you've got to remember, this is a movie from 1961. Like, they didn't hardly have any internet then.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they had drugs then.
People in 1961 had drugs, but maybe not these people. They had cigarettes and coffee. That's about all they had.
That's true. Everyone in this movie looks like Dagwood's boss from Blondie.
And coffee seems like a bit of a novelty to many of them.
Well, that's kind of the fascinating thing because, you know, you could say that nothing happens, yet there are all these like weird themes, but yet there's an obsession with coffee. This is basically what a David Lynch movie would look like if he had no talent.
Fair enough. I think that those are all great reasons why this is a really terrific episode. I don't know if it's a good first-time episode for a viewer unless you know that they're going to be up for that kind of movie. It's kind of a challenge if you've never seen this kind of movie before. And I guess I would generally tend to introduce people to a slightly softer, lighter movie where you can enjoy details of the movie, not just have your brain turn to mush with your first experience with this show. Although, absolutely, for a certain type of watcher, that's going to impress them even more.
Exactly. It tests the metal. It separates the men from the boys when it comes to MST3K and the girls from the ladies.
I mean, maybe this is just me because I feel like I had to graduate to seeing films like this and being able to sit through them. And I'm glad that I learned how to do that from this fine TV show that we talk about twice a month.
And you know what? I gotta say, there's something so wonderfully sweet and salty about this episode in terms of tone, because you have the incredibly grindingly boring movie and you have the incredibly stiff starched shirt short. Okay. So you've got that. You've got this kind of like seriousness and dryness. But then the sketches are so manic and delightful. If I had one complaint, it's that there's a criminal lack of gypsy in this episode.
That's true. Well, I mean, that's always true.
Yeah.
There's never enough gypsy.
No.
So you mentioned that you really liked the Planetarium sketch and the swing choir sketch, and we're not going to do an entire segment about planetariums or swing choirs, but I wondered if you had any particular connection with either of those two topics.
No. In fact, seeing this episode in, I think, grade 8 was the first time I ever heard of swing choir. And when someone explained to me that was a real thing that people liked doing, I laughed and said, what a bunch of dorks.
Aw.
And then when I found out planetariums were a real thing, it was a similar response.
Well, all right. I never did swing choir, certainly. I don't remember if I knew people who did it, but I know people who would have done it for sure. It's not my cup, I suppose, but planetariums are amazing.
Really?
Oh, God. Have you never been to a planetarium?
I've never been to a planetarium. No.
Well, they're amazing. As a kid, I was really into astronomy and stars and so forth. And it was basically a place where you got to see a little movie in an interesting space. You know, you're sort of sitting down, leaning back, looking up at the fake sky, and there's a nice voice that tours you through the stars, and it's really cool. Like, it's a really interesting way of showing that kind of information, and I loved it. And actually, I was down in DC, I want to say a year or two ago, and I went to the Air and Space Museum, and we went to the planetarium there. And while it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be, because they often try to make these planetarium shows a little too
hip.
Well, I mean,
this ain't your dad's Uranus.
Not that way, but more like, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson was narrating one of them, and it's just like, all right, this is a little pat. It's a little too, I wanted it to be more boring and thus more interesting than a slightly PBS for kids version of it, but not in a good way. I don't know. I mean, I'm not making much sense, but my point is a good planetarium show is really good. And plus they have laseriums there too sometimes, and you can go to a Pink Floyd performance while lasers shoot above you and make, I don't know, I've never done this.
And reminding me of one of my favorite jokes in this series of all time, Laserium, featuring the music of Donald Pleasance.
Very good. Anyway, yeah, planetariums are good. Swing choir is not for us.
No.
It has been decided. Coleman Francis Coleman was born in, was it Oklahoma? I think it was Oklahoma he was born in.
I don't think men like Coleman Francis are born. I think they're found.
Oh, yes. He was born in a test tube in Oklahoma in 1919. A product of people being locked inside trying to escape influenza.
They say that he refused breast milk and would only drink coffee. His first meal was a cigarette.
They made cigarettes out of heroin back then, of course.
You know, and boy, seeing Coleman Francis's face, you don't even need to know the fact that he grew up during the Great Depression. He looks it.
Well, so what do we know about Coleman C. Francis? I'm being told, I believe that stands for Coleman. What do we know about Coleman Francis, other than the fact that he directed 3 of the finest movies ever to grace season 6?
Well, let me ask you a question. Chris, because this has often come up. Is Coleman Francis the worst director ever?
I haven't seen every movie ever. Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Probably not, eh?
But he's one of the worst I've seen.
Well, I have something that I think kind of secures his title as perhaps the worst, because I have a quote here. The quote is this. I like Francis as an actor, but really he should have stayed in front of the camera. As a director, he really didn't know what he was doing. Edward D. Wood Jr. Yeah,
I knew where that train was driving.
Rightfully giving him the crown that he was unfairly given.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely Coleman Francis is a worse director than Ed Wood. And not just because his movies are dreary and dark and have everyone die at the end. Like Shakespeare did that too, and people seem to like him.
Yeah, there's an inventiveness to Ed Wood, even if the results aren't always technically competent.
And he made at least one really good film, Ed Wood did.
He did.
Namely Glen or Glenda.
And I will say this, all of his monster pictures are much better than Beast of Yucca Flats, and Edward D. Wood Jr. definitely knew how to bring charisma out of a man named Tor Johnson, something that Coleman Francis failed to do.
Exactly. But we'll get to that next episode.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, Coleman really, I guess, prior to MST3K would be best known as some guy.
That guy that nobody bothers to point out in this island Earth.
Yes, because that's what he was. He was just a bit player, and he could sometimes show up in like decent movies, and he could sometimes show up in the schlockiest stuff. But most of the time, he didn't even get credited. Do you know what his first actual credit was?
Was it Skydivers?
No. Better still. I think this was sometime in the 50s. He had a very small role as a detective in a Roger Corman produced film called Stakeout on Dope Street.
I'm being told by the internet that he had a credited role before that.
Oh man, that's his best credit though.
That is. He was in a John Sturges film called The Girl in White and seems to have been credited in that.
Oh,
I have not confirmed this by watching the movie myself because I've got enough Coleman Francis on my plate right now. Thank you.
But it's sort of amazing. Yeah, by the time you get into at least the earliest the 40s, he decided Coleman Francis was destined to become an actor. But Coleman Francis was destined for darker things, Chris.
Okay, like Muddy Prince of bad films.
Yes, that's one side of it. But I think perhaps explaining the look of his films, Coleman had a drinking problem.
Ah, well, that's a surprise.
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons why he did not get a lot of time in front of the camera, is that apparently Coleman was frequently sauced and pissed people off.
Oh.
So he decides, no one's hiring me. Well, screw it. I'm going to make my own movies. Enter Tony Cardoza.
I was going to say, who is the schmo who he lined up to fund his directing career?
Yeah. Well, that's where you get into producer star Cardoza.
Star, we're saying now. Okay.
Yeah, he's clearly lighting up the Coleman Francis movies that he is appearing in.
Let's put it this way. He has top billing in this film, and he paid for it to be made. Yeah. And yet he's clearly not the lead in any way. And he doesn't even survive.
No. So really, it's the tragedy of his life. That's the real story.
All right. So what do we know about Tony Cardoza?
Well, Tony Cardoza, what we know is that he was an artillery gunner in the Korean War. And when he became a civvy again, he was a welder on jet engines. Mm-hmm. Hence a fascination for this movie and a desire to fund it. But apparently, again, working on jet engines, he became like incredibly wealthy incredibly quickly. And he also got bit by the acting bug, but he never decided to take an acting class ever.
No, why would you do that?
Luckily, between his ability to amass money and Coleman's desire to make a movie, even if it starred Tony Cardoza, there you get Skydivers. But you know what? I opened with a quote from Ed Wood, and Ed Wood is woven back into this tale because one of his last roles, well, actually, it may not be one of his last roles, but a notable role for Tony Cardoza is that he's in Night of the Ghouls, the famous like Lost Ed Wood movie that was later released in, I think, 1984.
Filmed in 57, so a few years before Skydivers.
Yes, and I think sometime after Ed Wood passed. Released. I mean, not filmed.
Yes.
Criswell got him. No, there was a guy with a cape over his face directing the entire time, and everyone's like, yeah, that's Ed Wood.
Hence his later interest in zombies.
Yeah, these two were a hell of a team. Like, Cardoza helped Francis with the funding, and Francis was the creative voice of such films as Red Zone Cuba, Beast of Yucca Flats, and of course, The Skydivers.
All three of Coleman's films. Here's a fun factoid. It's not a factoid. It's a weird coincidence. When Tony Cardoza was doing his welding on jet engines, he was doing it at a company called Pratt & Whitney, which is based in East Hartford, Connecticut, whose facility in East Hartford, Connecticut is basically across the street from where my grandparents lived.
Oh, wow.
Yep. They said it was always across the street. Technically, you'd have to sort of go down a little entranceway and down a road and blah, blah, blah. But like, basically, yeah, they were within spitting distance of the Pratt Whitney facility where presumably Tony Cardoza worked for many years and acquired the money that allowed him to make this film.
So you have a tie to MST3K history.
I have yet another tie to MST3K history. It's random, but it's personal, so I wanted to share it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I guess to end things, but again, tying them to what I had mentioned earlier. So Coleman did indeed drink a lot of coffee, drink a lot of booze, and smoke a lot of cigarettes. Mm-hmm. So it is perhaps fitting that one of his final roles, if not his final role, was drunk in 1970's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, one of the best movies ever made.
Is that a major role in that film? I haven't seen it.
It is not.
So he's the drunk girl, right?
Oh, yes. He's the one who's the girl drunk.
Oh, well, that's good. That's a good note for him to end on.
Yeah. I think he went out on top, ultimately. I say that unironically.
Well, all right. I think that's a good amount of the life and times of Coleman Francis Coleman. And we will have to return to this when we do another Coleman Francis movie someday, because surely there's more to this fascinating auteur.
The Martin Scorsese of Yucca Flats.
So if Coleman Francis was the director of this film, who was the editor?
I'm very tempted to just say Coffee.
Oh, Coffee can surely edit better than this. I mean, it's a little more, 80s MTV jump cut, but it's got to be more consistent than this. Come on. This film is terribly edited.
This film is fascinating as a what not to do. And that's one of the reasons why I love this show. Because you get this unintended education watching these movies. Because the choices that are made, Chris, are baffling.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's always worth repeating that one of the great things about MST3K isn't so much the funny ha-ha jokes that are snide about the movies, but the complete education you can get about how to make a film through how not to make a film. Movies like The Skydivers really show you why you're not supposed to do certain things.
Yeah. For instance, if you're having a conversation with somebody and there's a third person who's not in the current shot, but is apparently part of the conversation and can hear everything, don't go from an exterior shot of two people talking in a wide shot to an extreme close-up of a guy's face clearly inside somewhere that we have not seen, and there was no establishing shot to connect anything to the footage.
I also seem to recall that shot was framed exactly the same as the guy in the conversation. It's a man and a woman talking. There's a third man who we don't know is part of the conversation until much later. When you cut to the man, it looks like the same shot as the man who's been talking all this time. Yes. It's completely confusing. He looks like a shapeshifter for a second. It's so disorienting. She's supposed to be sort of turning and looking at him, but because he's in the same conceptual space, so to speak, because they're framed the same way, they're looking the same way, they're talking the same way, it's incoherent. It doesn't go anywhere. You can't read this film.
Yeah, like imagine watching an episode of Bewitched, everybody, and you have Dick Sargent in the first half, and then for one shot you get Dick York, and then it's back to Dick Sargent again.
I'd watch that one.
Only if Uncle Arthur was in it.
So the editor of this film is a guy named Bob Lusby, Lusby. And you know what other film he was also the editor for?
I'm going to say Beast of Yucca Flats.
Nope, he never edited another film, according to IMDb.
Well, Beast of Yucca Flats is barely a movie, so I'm kind of right.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 bleak facts about today's episode, The Skydivers. Go, Adam, go!
The Skydivers is an Algonquin roundtable of the Coleman Francis entourage, a real who's who of nobodies. For instance, cinematographer Austin McKinney worked earlier with Francis as production supervisor for The Beast of Yucca Flats.
Joe, a character who likes coffee so much he's called Joe, is played by Eric Tomlin, who was not only in The Beast of Yucca Flats, but can also be seen in The Hellcats, riffed all the way back in season 2.
Tomlin's co-star Frederick Downs plays a pharmacist who bad girl Susie seduces rather than shell out $1 or $2 for some parachute-destroying acid. He would re-team with Francis for Red Zone Cuba, but he also appeared in the Hellcats, as well as Season 8 experiment, Terror from the Year 5000.
And Marcia Knight, our bad girl Susie, was also in The Beast of Yucca Flats, as were bit part players Barbara Francis, Alan Francis, and Ronald Francis. Guest in the sky? How'd they get there? Well, in this case, the answer's pretty obvious. Barbara is Coleman's ex-wife, and Alan and Ronald were his sons, and they play a family in the movie, too, of people who come to watch the skydiving.
And now, a micro-scorner. Composer John Bath also worked on Red Zone Cuba, and was apparently so proud of the Skydivers score that he recycled parts of it for Red Zone Cuba.
Speaking of recycled music, when one character in the Skydivers rides up on his bike, Mike hums a familiar tune. That's right, it's the Great Escape theme. The Great Escape, not to be confused with the delightful board game The Grape Escape, starred, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance. And furthermore, it was directed by Maroon's John Sturgis, and the theme itself was composed by Elmer Bernstein of Robot Monster fame. Why, it's an MST3K Connection triple score!
And still speaking of familiar tunes, Tom whistles something equally iconic during a fight scene. Yes, it's that classic Star Trek fight music that originates from the episode Amok Time, which was composed by Gerald Fried.
All right, enough about music. Let's talk about dancing. This film's got some. It's energetic, but it's not so great. But choreographer Robert Bob Banas had a long career in Hollywood, doing choreography for Down and Out in Beverly Hills, as well as an episode of Webster, and other things. So, yeah, and he was an actor in Season 3's Daddy-O, as well as in a lesser-known movie called West Side Story.
Crow has some harsh remarks about Susie's appearance.
He gave me everything. He gave me too much.
He gave me Michael Landon's face. Ooh.
Here we have another MST3K connection, as Landon was the star of Season 8's I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I suppose there are worse lookalikes to have.
When Joe writes a letter to Harry, we get a quick glimpse of the envelope. The cursive is a little hard to read, and Tom says,
Harry Reams? What is he doing?
Now, Harry Reams was the stage name of Herbert Stryker. And hopefully I haven't said that wrong, because if there's one thing I've learned from talking about John Holmes a few episodes ago, it's that if we get facts wrong about porn stars from the 80s, we get letters. Because yes, Harry Reams was a porn star with a long career, most famous for his 1972 role in Deep Throat.
At one point, Mike has a character say,
I'm going to go watch the Kefauver hearings anyway.
We talked about the Kefauver hearings in our episode on Racket Girls, but the Kefauver hearings were some Senate hearings back in the early 50s about mob activities. That's an obvious thing to bring up with Racket Girls, but this movie? Season 6 Mike must have had a bad case of Kefauver fever.
As a woman films a plane taking off, Crow jokes.
Margaret Burke White on the scene.
Margaret Burke White was a mid-century photographer, and specifically, she was the first American female war photojournalist. She did some great work, including some photos you might recognize, but I'm not going to describe photos to you during the Shallow 13, so, as always, links in the show notes.
And finally, when Harry goes to a bar, called the Skydiver, of course, he orders a drink. Tom, as the bartender, quips,
Yeah, here's your Fox Deluxe.
Fox Deluxe beer was made in Chicago in the 40s and 50s, and it seems to be well remembered. So well remembered that many brewers have recycled the name, including a Minnesota brewery from the 70s to the 90s. I'm guessing that's the beer that Tom's thinking of.
And that's time.
How about some coffee?
Coffee?
What is this coffee?
I like coffee.
Good.
Say, Chris,
Yes, Adam.
do you like coffee?
Coffee? I like coffee.
Coffee's pretty good. Let's enjoy some right now. I made a cold brew at home.
That's excellent. I've got some coffee here from earlier in the day. It's in a megaphonic mug, so that's cool.
And the megaphonic mug is so good, it keeps it warm. Order yours today!
Oh, let's really not overpromise that. But it does keep your heart warm, and it does keep our heat going, I guess. Coffee is good. I like coffee. I drink a lot of it.
Same here. I'm one of those people who has such a high tolerance to caffeine and coffee that I often relax with a hot cup of coffee before bed. That's no joke. I'll drink caffeinated coffee and then promptly go to sleep.
Oh, very good. My husband did one of those, spit into a thing and send it off, and they'll tell you about your genetics stuff. And
100% coffee, 100% Arabica beans.
Exactly. And it turned out that he had some genetics that allowed him to process caffeine really quickly.
Oh.
So he also would, at one point, drink coffee sometimes right before bed. He doesn't really do that anymore. So who knows? Maybe he's decided that genetics is a hoax. I don't know. But yeah, coffee's good. And I remember the coffee from this movie because there's nothing else to remember, right? It's just there's a guy who wants coffee, and then much later in the film, there's finally a scene with coffee in it.
It's really Chekhov's coffee cup.
It really is. I couldn't remember whether the coffee ever finally appeared or not, but it sure does. And devoted listener Chad, in his letter that we read earlier, reminded us that coffee appears constantly in the work of Coleman Francis, which is probably true, but I don't remember the coffee from the other episodes. I'm looking forward to it if it's there.
Yeah, that's, I don't remember Beast of Yucca Flats, but I remember mostly from Red Zone Cuba, just the line, "Water, sick man."
Yeah, I've watched Red Zone Cuba once.
Oh, but still that quote haunts you.
It was an episode that I really enjoyed, but that I definitely wanted to save as a sometimes treat. So that sometimes has occurred again almost 30 years later. But enough about that. I want to talk more about coffee. What's your regular coffee fix?
Oh, for me, I've got to have, I'm not very picky. Like, I'm one of those people who enjoys fancy coffee, but doesn't crave a particular kind because I have an AeroPress, and an AeroPress can take the crummiest coffee. This is not a sponsorship for AeroPress, by the way, but if they want to get in touch with us, megaphonic.fm, it's justashow.com/mail. I forget our address.
Just keep pecking at the keyboard. The internet gods will get it to us.
Yeah, eventually.
And I don't have an AeroPress, so we could definitely use one.
Oh, sure. It's perfect for single cups of coffee. And with the way that it is, like, it cuts down on the acidity of the coffee, and it just brews a perfect cup every time. So I could get fancy schmancy coffee and have it taste 10% better, or I could buy the cheapest, crappiest coffee and have it taste 30% better than it normally tastes.
So you're here for the magic.
Yeah. And I like getting value. So it's like, yeah, I'll pick up the $6 tub of coffee that's from like Grounds brand, you know?
Oh, no. That's going to go bad so quick.
Because the AeroPress transforms it, and I drink coffee so quickly, I don't have to worry.
All right. Well, we were a house of French press users for the longest time.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
But a little while ago, we picked up a drip coffee machine so that we could set coffee in it the night before and have it be brewed and ready in the morning, which we are now officially too lazy to do, even though it's clearly like less effort than getting ourselves out of bed in the morning to make coffee. But there you go. But I will say the first couple times I did that after spending a decade with a French press, it also felt like absolute magic for there just to be coffee when I woke up.
That's an incredible thing. However, flavor-wise, do you prefer the drip coffee or the French press, or do you have no preference?
I don't know. I haven't done really the blind taste test. I've just gone from one technology to the other and hope for the best.
Uh-oh, Chris. One of those cups of coffees has been replaced with acid. Choose carefully. It's weird. 3 out of 4 drinkers chose the acid.
Do you put milk in your coffee or anything like that?
No. I drink it black. I drink my coffee pure. Like, milk is reserved for bad coffee and bad coffee only. Like, when someone puts milk in their coffee, you know they're not serious.
When I first started drinking coffee, I didn't put milk in it, but I put a lot of sugar in it, to the point that one of my old bosses gave me a birthday present of a bag of coffee, like a pound of coffee beans, and a 5-pound bag of sugar separately wrapped. And it was a good joke gift. It was fantastic. I appreciated it so much.
Well, what got you to change?
I got older and more accustomed to the bitter flavor, and I use less and less of it. I rarely put sugar in my regular coffee now, just sometimes in iced coffee if I need to drink it fast, and if it's dubious coffee, if I'm on a road trip or something, back when that was a thing you could do. Mm-hmm. If I was on a road trip with the band or something and had some terrible coffee, man, worst coffee I ever had in my life was on a road trip in a band from a gas station in the middle of, I think, Nevada. No good at all. Not really coffee, not even really brown water. It was just ash.
Not the worst coffee I've ever had, because I think that was just at a random gas station, which is sometimes the source of great coffee. So you never know.
Yeah. You never know.
You never know. But I had I'm pretty sure it was at a gas station. I had my worst cup of coffee. But I will say this, not to be too down on my country, but I'm thankful that Tim Hortons has introduced a dark roast that resembles coffee. Because when I had the proper Tim Hortons coffee, which I ordered black because I'm a real human adult and you must enjoy coffee black. I like my coffees the way I like my Rebecca's, black.
And on Fridays.
Yes. Well, it's important because when I have coffee, I see my friends. but I ordered the regular coffee from the Tim Hortons, and I took a sip, and everyone else was enjoying theirs, albeit with milk and sugar, and I had mine black. And I just said, what is this? It's like whiny, but not. Oh, it's hard to describe. It's as though someone made a coffee-flavored cereal, left it out in the rain, and then brought it back in.
I think that's what MacArthur Park was about. Now we get to the real question of this episode. We spent a lot of time talking about skydiving and coffee, which were the movie's two main interests.
the motifs.
Well, we didn't talk about skydiving at all. I guess you've never been skydiving.
No, I was tempted to, and there was a part of me that's like, my 30th birthday, I'll totally do it. And I didn't get scared. There was just like no place offering nearby. And the places that I found, you'd have to travel to, and it was surprisingly expensive. And I was like, it's not worth it.
All right. Well, have you done the next best thing and studied industrial arts?
Neither. I did not take shop class in high school.
I sure didn't either. And I'm okay with that. I definitely was not interested in it then. I'm not really interested in it now. I'm not a super crafty person, I have to say. I'd like the idea of crafts, but I like digital stuff where I can hit undo and I can really easily make, an A and a B and a C version and compare them. And you can't do that with shop.
Yeah, the closest thing I've come to shop class is, of course, like I've taken part in a number of theater productions. And even though for the most part, like I was an actor, like everybody knows that when you're working on a low budget theater production, that means that you're also set. That means that you're also crew. That means you help strike the set. And in a lot of cases, that means you help build the set. So I have craft experience from that.
Well, and I seem to recall that you were mentioning off pod that you were recently making some sort of cardboard costume.
Oh, yes, that's right. So not that long ago, which people can view on my Instagram, is that I made a Robocop costume out of cardboard.
And why?
You saw that, huh?
I saw you talk about it. I didn't actually see the final results. Why were you doing this?
Well, COVID-19 has proven to be something of an inspiration for me. As I have been making a video a day, simply to entertain my pals who I know are bored to tears, and it gives me something to do as well. So yeah, I decided it's like, it'd be a great idea for this video if it ended with me in a Robocop costume that I built in 30 minutes.
I have been really enjoying your videos, and viewers who enjoy the comedy stylings of TV's Adam Clark should definitely head over to their link in the show notes and enjoy them. They're good. It's like TikTok, but on Instagram.
Yes, because I'm too old for TikTok. They refused to let me in.
They let that grandma in, but Adam was too old.
Yeah, well, she's like one of those hip rapping grannies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people have been crafting more now that there's been the lockdown or the isolation or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Like people have been making bread, which you don't think of cooking in the same breath as shop usually, but basically it's the same thing. You're just making stuff with your hands. You just get to eat it. Yeah. And so it's way better. Slightly less likely to chop one of your fingers off.
Although I did serrate one of my middle fingers cutting bread. So it does come with danger.
No, it's true. And I should say that, although I never got interested in shop, I did get interested in baking at one point. So there you go. But the other thing that I was thinking about as I was watching that short, and there are jokes about it, because Mike and the Bots are just sort of ripping on how into shop the kid is, which is kind of ridiculous because the kid is basically right. Like, he's awkward. He's an awkward teenager who doesn't know how to act, forced to be in an educational short that's poorly written. But ultimately, his points are correct. Paul Chaplin even says this in the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide. His bit about the short is just, the short, another one out of Kansas, tries to convince young people to take shop classes. To tell you the truth, it sounds pretty reasonable. Which it does.
Yeah.
But Mike and the Bots act like it doesn't because they're making jokes, and so they have to be funny, and that's a way of being funny, is making fun of the shop kid.
And I think too, it's like this is very much sort of hammering in what the Mike era is, which is sort of like to be the instant voice of dissent for anything.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Although I don't like making things with my hands, I can definitely get into a shop-based YouTube video.
So you've fallen down a rabbit hole?
On different occasions, I have fallen down different rabbit holes. There's a really great woodworking guy, and there's a person who makes guitars out of weird objects, and they're just, it's true that like the materials and the routineness of it and the comforting feeling of people pushing the wood. I mean, you don't get to smell it because it's YouTube, and that's probably for the best. But you can see that like the boy in the short is talking about how great the smell of wood and the feel of making a thing and pushing it against the tools and all that stuff, how tactile and how delightful that is. And it clearly is. Mm-hmm. And it's really soothing to watch people do it. I mean, okay, on the YouTube, it's all sped up and edited, and there's nice music behind it usually, and like there's a bit of an art to it. But nevertheless, I can totally get why people are into it. It makes a lot of sense, and the kid's passion is completely valid. It's not for me, but it's completely valid.
Yeah, industrial arts is a good choice for life.
Yeah, absolutely.
We stand by it. Everyone at It's Just a Show, including Beth, who's not with us. I mean, she's not dead.
No.
She's actually building a bookshelf right now.
Yeah. Beth is the craftiest of the three of us by far. But did you see that dinosaur planter she made?
Yeah, come on. None of us could do that.
No. But have you ever gone down the industrial, shop, woodworking, etc. YouTube hole?
Every now and then I will watch something similar, but I guess closer to my interests, is that there's a great channel called Studio ADI. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, so Studio ADI is a special effects company.
Ah, yes.
And so you can see them building prosthetics because they are an old school special effects company. So you can see them working on prosthetics and things like that and animatronics. And it is gorgeous. And I could just watch these people and their homemade videos all day.
The thing like that I've watched multiple times, and I think I've shown it to you, is a short documentary, 11 minutes long, let's say, that was made about how they made the old HBO intro thing.
Yes. Da-da-da. With me now. Da-da-da. Da-da-da.
No, I loved that. I'd often watch that and then not watch the movie that came after it. It was an amazing little thing that they used to play before movies with, a whole scene where it would swoop over a town and then go up and then into this HBO that the camera would then go into, and there'd be all these lights, and it was amazing. And it's all done with practical effects, and they made a video showing how it's done, which has its own theme music, which is delightful in a very different way from how the Bumpers music is. It's real cheesy, and it's got lyrics, as I recall. It's just great. Link in the show notes for that. Totally recommend watching that as well.
And I'll tell you, at least once a week, I will go to one of my favorite YouTube videos, which is that intro followed by the intro to HBO's Tales from the Crypt, itself a special effects masterwork.
I've got a note here in our show notes that says Hobbit fashions ? And I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there's one bit with Susie where one of the bots quips, she looks like she's from Middle Earth.
Geez, she looks like she's from Middle Earth.
So why not talk about hobbits and how they dress?
Okay. Did she look like she was from Middle Earth?
I think in certain book editions, she would look like she's from Hobbiton, yes.
All right.
Because generally speaking, what they're wearing is like robes, and you kind of see that in the movie, since they base that on some editions of the books, the Peter Jackson movies, of course. We're not talking about Ralph Bakshi. Let's never talk about old wealth. But yes, so I think they made that quip based on the fact they look like robes. Recently, I watched and am very grateful for the special features on the Lord of the Rings discs.
Okay.
Because there's about 50 hours of material.
All right. Now, I am somebody who has not read Lord of the Rings, has not watched the movies, has certainly not watched the DVD specials. So this is all up to you.
Oh, absolutely. I only have a little bit to say, but I thought I'd share some stuff. So yes, Lord of the Rings, I too am not a fan, but if you are a fan, why not go to megaphonic.fm and listen to By the Bywater, your leading Tolkien podcast, I assume.
I mean, it should be your leading Tolkien podcast.
Yes. But I had no interest in Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, I'd heard about the book and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll read that. But that's sort of in the pile of, yeah, maybe I'll read Dune. And so I never got to it, and none of the TV channels that I grew up with ever aired the Rankin Bass Lord of the Rings movies, which I understand were like pretty fun adaptations. I did see many times late at night the terrible rotoscope Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings with an interminable score by Leonard Rosenman. So I had no desire to see anything based on Lord of the Rings until the announcement was made that one of my boys, the great Peter Jackson, who was previously making horror movies and Heavenly Creatures, but mostly horror movies, had gotten the rights to it, and it was his passion project, and he was going to make all three and show Hollywood how it's done. So I was rooting for him. I wasn't sure if he'd succeed, and sure enough, he made like the most popular movies of the turn of the century.
Yes.
And, the films I haven't rewatched because I watched them once and I was like, oh man, there's so many cool Peter Jackson-y quirks in here. I don't care about what's going on at all, but I just love the style of this production. This is so good. But sure enough, like the costumes look great. They look very authentic. Tons and tons of work, as I now know, have been put into them. I think I am especially a fan of what people did with the armor. They contacted Weta. It's not Weta, as I originally thought, but the Weta special effects team, which may or may not have, they originated out of New Zealand, and they had all of these theories. It's like, this is how this character, like an orc's body would be like, and they wouldn't have strong armor in this area because that doesn't go with their beliefs and all this sort of stuff. That was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So I recommend to anyone during lockdown, watch the Lord of the Rings special features because you will need more than a day to finish them. But I have to share my favorite story that came out of this, which is barely costume related, but it's the main reason I put this here.
Okay. All right.
So John Rhys Davies is a delight. And I've loved him in everything. But what I didn't realize is that in addition to being a great actor, Chris, he's a great man. He's actually the greatest man alive for this little prank he pulled. So to play the dwarf Gimli, he was, of course, given heavy makeup. But one of the things that not everybody knows is that John Rhys Davies is missing a chunk of one of his fingers. But he's given an addition to his finger so that he has a normal finger on the hand that's missing that chunk of his finger. But what he did as a bit of a goof is that he wanted to see what was on the inside of the finger because it felt so good and so natural, and after a while it felt like a real extension of his body. So he takes a small knife and cuts into it, and sure enough, it's realistic. It's full of like blood and sinew. It looks like he's cut into his own finger.
Oh. And
he sort of walks around going, help, there's been a terrible accident. And as he's going on, as people are getting concerned, he's like, but I can't stop touching it. And he starts pulling it and stretching it in front of everybody. Apparently, Peter Jackson nearly called the New Zealand equivalent of 911.
Oh, that's great.
Master prankster, John Rhys Davies.
Well, with that, I think we are almost out of time for our skydive. The ground is coming quickly upon us. I guess we just have time for one last thing.
Well, what's a final fact that people can dance to while waiting for skydivers to fall to their deaths?
So there's a scene in which Susie is inside one of the, I guess it's a hangar, I'm not sure, but it's covered in drapery, and she's on a ladder, and she's clearly working on something, and a guy walks up and says, hey, what are you doing? And Tom says,
What are you doing?
Working for Christo.
I don't get it.
You don't get it. Do you know who Christo is?
I'm aware of the Bobcat Goldthwait routine where he pretended to be a magician named the Amazing Christo and performed biblical miracles.
It's not that. Christo was an artist who, with his wife, Jean-Claude, did a lot of really remarkable public artwork installations. He wrapped buildings in fabric. That's basically his main dealio, was that he would take the Pont Neuf in Paris and wrap it entirely in fabric. Or he would take the big public building, the Bundestag in Germany, this massive building, and just wrap the whole thing in fabric. And it would be there for, a few years maybe. And there were these remarkable public works. There was one in New York City at one point in 2005 called The Gates, where throughout Central Park, there were these large orange gates that you could walk through and underneath, and they had sort of fabric on top of them. And basically, they're these massive things. Everybody loved them. They were super interesting. Well, I guess not everybody loved them, but most people loved them. And I bring that up both because he's kind of interesting, and it's good to know about him and his wife, who was a collaborator, and they were artists. So the fact that they were both born on the exact same day meant a lot to them.
Yes.
I mean, that's cute. She passed away a few years ago. He passed away a few weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah, he just passed at the age of 84. There's still some of his works that are going to be completed, and that is good. But he'll be missed. He was an interesting guy, and it was another one of those moments where somebody dies, and then I watch an MST3K episode, and they're referencing him, and I think, oh,
he gets MST3K gets sad all over again.
Yep, they didn't mean for that to be a sad joke. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you know where I can find a good cup of coffee, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We would love to hear from you. And this show is made possible by fine listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. And you can find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And of course, if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes, which will be at itsjustashow.com/episode/72.
Oh, man. Well, I guess we've run out of things to say about Coleman Francis. No more Coleman Francis for us.
That is exactly how trilogies work. You watch one movie, and then you go off and you watch Hellcats.
I thought trilogies worked in that, the first part's always the best.
That is also possible. Or there could be 5 of them. I don't know. But yes, that's right. We're going to keep going down Coleman Francis Coleman Lane and look at Season 6, Episode 21, The Beast of Yucca Flats. Woo! Can you feel the excitement in the room?
Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
I am kind of excited for this one, honestly. Because this is insane. Like, this movie is bonkers. What is it? Farmer feeds slop to hungry pigs. Like, it's a tone poem.
Oh, it's also got 2 shorts.
Ooh, I forgot about those.
It's got Money Talks, the one with Benjamin Franklin appearing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got, oh my word, get yourselves ready, Progress Island, USA.
Uh-oh.
So we're going to have to do some research on Puerto Rico in the next couple days.
Man, quarantine and homework, bummer.
But until then...
I love coffee.
Coffee? I like coffee. Take it away, Theme Squad. Let's talk about dancing.